Tom Hayward, CEO of the Clutch Pro Tour, stated to NCG that LIV Golf has at least one good effect on the third tier of golf in the UK. He also stated that it is terrific for developing players within the professional world. On a very similar note, Fred Funk, the 8-time Tour champion, said that he would be ecstatic if he were offered the kind of money LIV is giving their players. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss this. First up, the Clutch Pro Tour CEO has recently praised the LIV Golf Tour for being brilliant for developing golfers. Why? Well, here's what you need to know. Tom Hayward, CEO of the Clutch Pro Tour, stated to NCG that LIV Golf has at least one good effect on the third tier of golf in the UK. One aspect of LIV Golf's growth that has gone unnoticed throughout all the issues, fierce rivalries, and legal dramas has been the effect on the developmental circuits, notably in the UK. Will the enormous amounts of money spent at the top trickle down? Will the gap be further widening between the major leagues and minor tours? Will opportunities for new talent suddenly be more plentiful? Will the game actually advance as Greg Norman so cheerfully promises? The CEO of one developmental tour has commented on the Breakaway Series' ongoing division and seismic shift in professional golf, saying that LIV has been great for developing players. Clutch Pro Tour CEO Tom Hayward discussed LIV's seismic effects on his own circuit, unveiling innovative incentives for 2023. According to Hayward, a number of DP World Tour veterans, including Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, and Sergio Garcia, have signed with LIV Golf. Hayward believes that their defections have created space for new talent to emerge further down the ladder. He then went on to explain that those guys fought very hard to climb the levels, but generally 5 or 6 years ago, before COVID, those players would have been moving on to the professional tiers, he continued. Additionally, Richard Mansell and Dale Whitnell, along with other golfers who were competing on the minor circuit a few years ago, are now well-known figures on the DP World Tour, he explained. Hayward then went on to state that the opportunities are enormous, so if he was a player on the Clutch Pro Tour or any of the other developmental tours for that matter, he would certainly be chomping at the bit right now. Hayward, though, denies that the enormous wealth at the top in any way is trickling down. He believes that LIV's rise has positively opened the door for new stars to thrive, including those from his own circuit. But what do you think? Do you agree with Hayward? Speaking of the LIV Tour, Fred Funk recently stated that if he was offered that kind of money during his golfing career, then he would take the offer without question. Here's what he said. Now, if you're a golf fan, you're probably aware of the struggle currently happening within the pro game. The PGA Tour versus LIV, aka the established order versus the highly controversial newcomer. Now, it seems as though everybody in the sport has an opinion on it because it is a subject that is often discussed, with many divided, and recently the 8-time Tour champion Fred Funk had the opportunity to tell his on a recent episode of Golf's Subpar. He elaborated that he can certainly see both sides of it, and that he's always believed that if he were in the position of Westwood, Mickelson, and Poulter, arguably the 3 biggest names who left early, and he were in that stage of his golfing career, he would be very excited and amped up if they offered him that kind of money. Funk went on to explain that he didn't believe that athletes who were toward the end of their careers had many options. Most of them were unable to compete due to the tour's competitiveness, and they still needed to be qualified for the Champions Tour. Funk does not hold the early defectors responsible for these reasons. Additionally, Funk questioned the media's wrath towards Saudi Arabia, with his major argument being hypocrisy. He explained, "We've already played in Saudi Arabia. We've had contracts with Saudi Arabia. We have contracts playing for the regular tour in China. It's not like we haven't played there before," he said. At the same time, these guys are set for life. But what do you think? Would you do the same thing in the current professional golfer's position? Let us know. So the big question remains, what is ahead for the LIV Tour in 2023? When Patrick Mahomes won Super Bowl 54, at this time 2 years ago, Phil Mickelson was the popular reigning PGA Championship champion. A lot's happened since then, huh? The first season of LIV Golf is over, and a ton of golfers made a ton of cash. More than that, LIV has dominated headlines and practice range chatter for the past 4 months. Bulldogging its way into the golf conversation, LIV has made a name for itself as a serious rival and threat to the PGA Tour and its normal way of doing business, despite being brushed off as a joke or irrelevant by those who should have been a bit more concerned. In its first year, LIV completely changed the golf industry and finished the season in greater shape than it had at the beginning. Then, by the end of the first season, the league had recruited notable champions like Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, and eventually world number 2 Cam Smith into its fold. The league initially featured a few past their prime former stars. As is typical with anger, the outrage over the league's Saudi financial support subsided, and media sources are starting to post LIV scores without the Saudi-backed or Rebel Tour modifiers. However, the worries about sports washing remain, and the fact that the anger has subsided shows that the sports washing of Saudi atrocities is succeeding as intended. It is obvious that Rory McIlroy was mistaken when he said in February that LIV was dead in the water. What will LIV do as a follow-up then? What current changes has LIV made to the golf industry? Here's the situation on all fronts. First up, the broadcast possibilities. LIV's main issue is that only some people are actually watching the golf. Although the Palace intrigue is entertaining, LIV will remain more of a discussion point than a legitimate sporting event until spectators genuinely start to watch the golf for its own sake. LIV could never negotiate a broadcast agreement that would have allowed it to air any of its events on a platform other than YouTube. LIV generated a lot of excitement and was able to conjure up some fantastical scenarios about its potential, but its potential is only limited if it can attract sports fans. Next up is the overall experience. Even though it had to push the point, LIV stood true to its slogan of golf but louder in every way. With a little golf thrown in, LIV events were a cross between a tailgate, a club dance party, and, at Trump-owned courses, a political rally. Throughout the season, LIV players and their throngs of Twitter defenders also became vocal, criticizing the PGA Tour, the official world golf rankings, the majors, and pretty much everyone else who wasn't under the LIV tent. Nobody felt neutral about LIV's attitude. Some fans loved it, and others loathed it. Another thing, the majors. The major tournaments have gained more prominence after many of the game's most well-known players left the PGA Tour. Fans may now only observe PGA Tour and LIV players interact on the courses during the majors. Only 4 times a year at most will Tiger versus Phil, Rory versus Cam Smith, and Jordan Spieth versus Patrick Reed recur, if the majors decide to let LIV players compete, that is. Of the 4 majors, the PGA of America oversees the PGA Championship and has adopted the strongest anti-LIV stance. Although Augusta National has maintained its normal silence, the Green Jackets won't appreciate it if it becomes involved in this discussion or any LIV lawsuits. Recently, the R&A, which oversees the Open Championship, has begun to warm up to LIV players. Will the other 3 follow if one opens the door? And finally, what is the future of the LIV Tour? Now, the continuous will he, won't he regarding potential defectors was one of the summer's most entertaining questions. Several well-known players like Smith and Joaquin Niemann decided to switch to LIV as the majors and PGA Tour seasons progressed. The rate of tour jumpers has slowed recently, but a report published this week in The Guardian said that several well-known athletes, including Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele, may be gearing up to make the switch to LIV. Some pre-jump forecasts came true, Koepka and Smith, whereas others didn't. Hideki Matsuyama. Future player departures, especially those of young, talented, and highly ranked athletes, would only help LIV standing with sponsors and broadcasters. And there you have it, everything you need to know about the Clutch Pro CEO and 8-time champion Fred Funk on why they strongly believe the LIV Tour is a good thing. Now make sure to let us know your thoughts down below. And as always, thanks for watching.